introduction was very good. It did tell you something about the Preston model and myself. The place to start really is 2008, because obviously we had the huge global financial crash, but Preston had put all its eggs in one basket. Inward investment from multinational corporations who had promised for many years to come into Preston and knock half of it down and rebuild it in a project worth 700 million or so. So when that crashed with the global financial crash, myself and my colleague Matthew Brown decided that we needed to do something different, really, than just rely on the super rich coming in and helping us. So we decided to meet with some economists from a consultancy called the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, because they'd been doing stuff along these lines a little bit with Manchester Council. Nothing that we've done really is new, but we've done several things and they've been packaged up and labelled the Preston model, but nothing's really new anymore, but it's a new context, if you like. And so at Preston, we'd already been looking at what we called our fairness agenda. We'd already started to pay the living wage at the council. We were the first council outside London to do it. We talked about trying to create more co-ops, more cooperative businesses in Preston, without a lot of success. So when we talked to Cllr, we talked about how we could maybe start to make this happen. And we'd looked across the water at Cleveland in Ohio, who had started co-ops. Now, it was the university there that started them, and they had a lot of capital, which we didn't. But they had managed to start up several large cooperative businesses from scratch, employing local people, paying decent wages, and all that money is kept in the locality. And that method was called an anchor institution. So the university was an institution that was anchored in the local community and wasn't going anywhere. No matter what happens, how many global crashes there is, or if they're struggling, they're not going to up sticks and disappear to another country when things get rough, like a lot of businesses do. So we started looking at other public sector bodies around us, including ourselves, Preston Council, of course. We were looking Preston because Preston has quite a big public sector. The county council, we have a two-tier system here, is based in Preston. We've got a university, a large hospital, housing associations, police, colleges, things like that. We invited them to a couple of seminars, told them what we wanted to do, and tried to get them on board. After that, we started a small group to look at where all these institutions were spending their money. So in total, the public sector institutions in Preston have got at least £1 billion a year to spend. That's a huge amount of money and a huge amount of influence on the local economy if they decide to spend it there. Preston itself, Preston Council, which is a fairly small council in reality, was only spending 14% of its spending on goods and services actually in Preston. So we started studying where they were spending it and then trying to encourage each other to spend more in the locality, and also encourage local suppliers to tender for our contracts more. In a period of 2 years, we increased Preston Council spending in Preston to 28%. We doubled it. All the anchors put together increased their spending in Preston in this 2-year period by £70 million, and in the same 2-year period in Lancashire by £200 million. So these are not insignificant sums. Major sums of money going into the local economy, jobs, the supply chain, that would have gone elsewhere. Now, a bit further down the line, the Centre for Local Economic Strategies had a look at perhaps who was missing out, because we'd started to get noticed at this point, started to get criticism that this is just protectionism, that we're just cutting other people out of the chain. But when they had a look at those that were missing out, it's likely to be the wealthy Southeast and global shareholders, in fact, that are losing out, who are already very wealthy. So we dispute that point. Plus, the world is extremely complicated. There's billions of transactions every day across borders. So we can't create a little bubble and just act on our own. So these claims that we're just creating a protectionist city is just nonsense. So we also looked at a place in Spain called Mondragon, which is in the Basque region of Spain, which has been growing worker co-ops for, I think it's about 70, 80 years, since the Spanish Civil War, in fact, the 1930s. The Basque region was terribly neglected at that time. And a local priest decided that they could protect themselves from the government, from the state, who were neglecting them, by creating worker cooperatives. And they started to do that, and now they've got 100, and they've got a large umbrella organisation called the Mondragon Corporation, which looks after all the co-ops. They have a bank, they have their own bank, which trades on the international stage, but it's a local bank for them, and it's set up so that it's virtually impossible to be taken over by a bigger bank, because it's one member, one vote. And they have a university, and they have a welfare system, and they have a social side to it. It's a whole place system, and they were protected to a very large extent from the global crash in 2008. It did affect them a little bit. It affected the welfare system. They realised they needed to put a bit more money into that afterwards. A couple of co-ops got into trouble, but a lot of the workers were taken on by the other co-ops. So they fared much better than areas that didn't have the co-op. So we wanted to try and recreate that. Very difficult, of course. They've been at it for 70, 80 years, and they've got 100 co-ops, but we wanted to start doing that. So we started a body called the Preston Cooperative Development Network, which is separate from the council, which is a lot of interested parties, which sits and offers advice and encourages local businesses, local individuals to start co-ops in Preston. We've already got a worker co-op cafe, we've got a digital co-op, one or two other things, but in the last 12 months or so, we've won some funding from the Soros Foundation, and we've got the money to encourage more co-ops for another 10 co-ops. We've got some local taxi drivers interested in getting together and starting a co-op, and there's several other things too. So that's really starting to kick off now. Something else that we wanted to recreate from Mondragon was the bank. So we're not the only ones wanting to start a bank. In fact, I think we probably talked about it first, but some other areas may have overtaken us a little bit on this and been a bit quicker at it, but we're getting there. We've set the company up. It's registered with the financial authority, or whoever it has to be, the Bank of England or whatever it is. And we've got partners, we've got capital to put into it. It needs, X amount of capital to start, maybe 20 million. And the bank is going to exist to support the small and medium-sized enterprises that really struggle to get loans from the high street banks, and they really do. And also, obviously, to support the co-op sector, which we're trying to create here. It will also be a day-to-day trading bank. It should have high street branches, even if they are electronic branches, in fact. But that's what we're aiming at in the next year or two. We're aiming for about 3% of the market share in 3 years to make it viable. So that's quite a big project. Another thing we looked at to support the local economy, the Lancashire Pension Fund is a huge pot of money, hundreds of millions of pounds. We have a seat on the board, but only one seat, so we can't control the thing. We can't tell them what to do. We can only encourage, but they have started investing more locally. They've built some student accommodation. They're investing in a new hotel, and all that's worth tens of millions of pounds, which wasn't happening before. Our own investments, Preston Council, we had an old market hall. We knocked it down. We recreated it under Victorian canopies. It's full of local traders. It's wholly owned by the council. It washes its face, and it should grow. And right next to it, we want to build a multiplex type cinema with bowling alley and car park on the site of the old market, costing around £35 million, wholly funded by council money. So any profits from that will come back to the council. It will be wholly owned by the council once we've paid the developer back. Other ideas that we've had are credit union. Our credit union went bust many years ago. We brought another one into the area, so that's building up too. We support a local development finance initiative that lends money to people who are financially excluded. We've kept all our voluntary sector grants when most councils have cut them. We have our own advice services. People too, we started a food co-op for a while. We did energy purchasing, collective energy purchasing to help save people money. We did try and start a wind farm, an energy co-op, but we were blocked on planning grounds, unfortunately. But we're constantly looking at how we can improve, fuel poverty. So we haven't done everything. There's lots of other towns and cities doing stuff along the same lines. There is local currencies, which we've never tried. As I said, we're not that big. We can't do everything. Municipal bonds, which are kicking off now, which look really interesting. Mutual credit, which is a way of trading for small and medium-sized enterprises between themselves without money, which cuts the banks out again, the high street banks who, control everything really. And there are councils now around the country, along with ourselves, trying to look at whole place community wealth building. So we're looking for a strategy that covers everything really. The fuel poverty, the food poverty, the banking, undercutting the banking system, the whole thing. We need a whole encompassing strategy so that we're not reliant on inward investment. Preston Council, over the last few years, while we've been pursuing this, we haven't stopped looking for inward investment, and any money that rolls by from the government, we grab it. We're not daft, but at the same time, we know that it's not sustainable, because these things are at the will of the existing government and at the will of developers and investors. Whereas if you're more sustainable locally, if you have worker co-ops, that money stays in the local economy for longer. The longer it's in local pockets, the better off the area is. Less of the money leaks out to shareholders across the globe, and they decide whether the money comes back or not. Whereas if it stays here, we decide where it goes. And that's really the crux of community wealth building.